That's right. I am back, and couldn't leave well enough alone. As far as the breech for the conversion kit CO2 to HPA that I have been talking about, some issues with it, things that it seems like the manufacturer, the seller did not take into account when they apparently made changes to the tubing that's involved and connections that are involved with the conversion kit itself were not compensated for with the breech. And as I had previously pointed out, the breech has been taken off, and as you can see, there's an area here where there's a step here between the Z elbow and this piece that is appears to be added in between here and the tubing, which was added for this gauge to show you the pressure inside the valve. But there's also a small step. See, the tube is 1 diameter. This piece, here's a step, is also a slightly larger diameter than the tube, and then another step between here and here. So there was, as I explained in the previous video, quite a bit of tilting involved with the breech, especially because it's sitting up here, which is a decent amount higher than the tube itself. So the back portion of the breech sitting back here, and the front was sitting here. So besides cutting it down, even after cutting it down and getting it to the point where the breech would no longer sit on, make contact with the Z elbow fitting, still had to deal with the tilt that was being created by the mismatch between this piece and the tube. It wasn't a lot, but as I said, there was a noticeable sighting of light between the tube and the breech, closest to that raised area. As I said, an idea I had was possibly shimming up the back end of the breech to take out that tilt and get it nice and flat. I guess that would create a uniform gap as long as the transfer port was making good contact with what would eventually be installed, the barrel, with the barrel port. I didn't think it would be an issue, but I thought about it some more, and I did go ahead and take a Dremel tool to the breech itself. Back to the breech, I marked it with some masking tape from this end back to approximately where this distance here, from here to here on the breech itself. So approximately from here on over to here, and as you can see on the bottom, I removed a little bit of material. Now, the one decent thing about this POM material, as it indicated in the previous video where I showed the explanation of what POM is and some of the good qualities about it, as far as it being very stiff. The one thing that I've noticed when I was cutting this, when I was belt sanding the end, and when I was grinding this area here on it, it doesn't gum up and melt like a lot of the plastic pieces I've cut, whether it's for an air gun part, like the forearm. You know, this, when I cut this with a Dremel tool and a cutoff wheel, you know, big chunks of melted, gummed up plastic were stuck all over the edge. That's not the case with this POM. So that's a good thing. There wasn't a whole lot, a little bit of sanding going on afterwards to smooth this out, which I went back, as I've done previous videos on, and this is what I came up with for polishing out hammer valve tubes. Just a glued on piece of sandpaper onto a wooden dowel. But I used this on this portion of the breech to get it a little bit more smoothed out. The Dremel tool itself that I used is right here. It's not felt. It's from my work. It's kind of soft, but yet still abrasive, and perfectly round and straight. It's not tapered at all. So that makes for a good flat contact of the entire length of this portion of the Dremel tool with as far back as I needed to go, and working back and forth and up and down inside the radius on the breech. As I said, I knew it wasn't going to take very much based on the math that I did and the differences between the diameters of the tube and the piece that was tilting this up. The difference in diameters was 5 thousandths. So because I'm working with a radius and not a diameter, it would be half of that, or 2.5 thousandths needed to be removed off of this area. Not a whole lot. I did initially try just doing the sanding and getting the 2.5 thousandths removed with this. And maybe it's because of the density of this material. It was going to take a ridiculously long amount of time to get that sanded off, especially evenly. Given that the dowel rod itself is slightly smaller in diameter, working up along the curvature and down to the bottom of the curvature and back up the other side of the curvature, as well as back and forth this way. That's when I decided, you know what, I remembered that I've got that particular Dremel tool, and why don't I give that a try? So that made much shorter work of removing the material, which only needed to be 2.5 thousandths. But now, upon dropping the breech onto the tube and holding it up, it is a very nice fit without seeing any light underneath. So I have the clearance built into the breech itself for this. I wanted to be careful not to remove too much material from the breech, where I would have created another gap between here and, I actually wanted to remove just enough so that there was still a portion of the breech sitting on this, but yet not have it be tilted up, but flat, sitting on this, the rest of the breech sitting on this, and have it nice and level. So I'm more comfortable with the way that this turned out than with not doing anything and leaving it tilted up. As I explained, you know, the fact that it's tilted up back here, by the time the gun arrives and I get everything attached, along with an 18-inch barrel, which is going to extend out, that tilt is going to build itself up over the more and more distance that it covers. So pretty happy with how this turned out. I've just done a drop-on fitting of it. I haven't reattached it. I need to do that, but this was just the latest update to what I've done. Talk about a lot of work having to go in to making this work with this. Something that supposedly is specifically made, the breech, for the various kits that are involved. One of the other things, you know, it would have been a much longer process had I gotten the brass breech versus this POM material breech. Would have had the same issues. I'm assuming they're identical in length and, you know, machining aspects. So at least it didn't take as long having the breech in the POM material. The fact that I have to do any work to it is kind of something I'm not, you know, very happy with. Seems to me, again, the logical explanation I could piece together is that various changes were made to this, and I understand and appreciate the fact. I do consider the addition of this gauge showing the pressure that's in the valve versus only having a gauge that only shows you the pressure in here, you know, as a good thing. Unfortunately, the machining tolerances that went into the tube and this piece here and the elbow weren't close enough to make the breech just a drop-on, put 2 screws in and be done with it type of operation, which it should be as far as I'm concerned. So, you know, the fact that you have to go ahead and do work on the breech, possibly screw it up, and you've got to factor in the cost of how much you need to spend on sending this back, it's not worth sending it back. So, if you do go this route, once again, I made this warning before. Unfortunately, it seems to be, it's the only HPA rated conversion that I can find for Crossman pistols. If you go this route, prepare to do some work, whether it's sealing off the kit itself, using some upgraded O-rings, all the way to ordering the breech that's going to be required to work with this particular kit, and do work to it to make it operable with the conversion kit. That's it. I I'm going to get that reattached, get the screws on, make sure that nothing cocks or tilts in the process of doing that, and checking it out for being level. So more work, and hopefully everything will piece together in a nice cohesive manner. Okay, thanks for checking out these videos. I'm getting tired of having to do all this modification to things that should be manufactured to work with one another without issues, but yet they're, you fix one issue and you come across another issue. At least that's been my experience. So you guys stay safe and shoot safe. One thing I forgot to mention was an idea that I thought would be pretty neat. Was if I can get my hands on another 18-inch barrel, I could possibly have two different setups kind of all ready to go, as far as the stock CO2 setup, leaving everything together as far as the breech and a barrel attached to a hammer / valve tube, and basically just hit, remove the trigger grip assembly, and be able to, just go over and attach it to another setup version of a barrel, the barrel, breech, and the conversion kit. Keep that all together and be able to fairly easily and quickly swap back and forth, depending on what type of shooting I want to do, between the HPA setup and the stock CO2 setup. So I'm going to keep that in mind and see if maybe that's something I could possibly do. So just wanted to mention that. Everyone, take care.